Hello and welcome to Penny for a Tale. My name is Mitchell, and this is the streaming show about everything TTRPG related that we can throw onto a pile. And enough about me. Let's hear some of our other peeps.
Oh, hi, I'm Spence. Apparently, I'm a co-host in this venture, and so I do this. I play the games. I run a monthly game, which we still haven't figured out what we're going to call that segment, but it's one-page RPGs. It's going to be great. And I'm also a co-host of Game School on the TSR Podcast Network, owner of Resident Moon Audiobook Solutions, and all-around gaming nerd. And our special guest is...
Hello. Hi, I'm Jacqueline Bryk. I am an award-winning game designer and freelance writer. I have a strong background in Tatterpigs, or what you might call tabletop RPGs. I just like calling them Tatterpigs because that's what it essentially becomes when you put vowels in it. And I have written for such games as Cult Divinity Lost, Vampire the Requiem 5th edition, Changeling the Lost 2nd edition, the new edition of Fading Suns that's coming out this year, Jason Pitts After the War, and a couple other games.
Oh, wait, whoa, Jason Pitts After the War?
Yeah. Goddamn right.
Yeah. So, I love the fact when anybody can put award-winning in front of their name. That just makes me super happy.
Yeah.
I know, right?
So my first award was actually a Golden Cobra LARP award in 2016, maybe 18. I don't actually remember at this point. And then Cult Divinity Lost won Silver Ennie for editing, for text and words and writing. That's what I meant to say, for writing. And I edited the English edition, so got that. And Vampire 5th edition won Origin's Best Game of 2019, and I wrote the safety rules for that. So technically I've won an Ennie.
You're
That's
part of the
freaking
process.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, own it.
Also, in After the War, the section I wrote is Cry Uncle, which is the adventure about the kids dealing with trauma and Uncle Frank.
Ooh, interesting. So if people are interested, I mean, After the War just came out on
It's
Kickstarter.
really good.
Really amazing. Yeah, it's a game I really look forward to checking out. And if you haven't checked out as well, there's of course the Cult
Divinity Lost.
Oh yeah, with all the scenarios, and Lucina was the one that Jacqueline wrote. It's definitely one of my favorites here. A lot of kind of interpersonal family stuff going on there.
Yep.
So check all that out. But so you have this amazing award-winning persona. You are amazing. How did you get there?
Woo. So I've been wanting to write games for a while. I've been playing tabletop games since I was 6 years old.
Oh wow.
Started with D&D. Didn't actually get into anything non-D&D until college. Took me a little bit. So it's kind of a late bloomer. Started going to conventions, started talking to people who've written their own stuff. I wrote my first LARP in 2012. It was called The Paradise Machine, and it was sort of a weird allegorical, like, hey, the gods have left because humanity has finally created technology that can, match the gods. What are you going to do about that?
Okay, interesting.
And I got asked to write a short section for, God, what the hell is it called? Dead Scare, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game by Elsa Sinjunsen, I believe that's her last name. And she's wonderful. She is a disabled Jewish woman who decided to write a game about housewives in the 1950s dealing with gender roles and also zombies.
Oh wow, I'm surprised I missed that. That sounds like a very interesting game.
It's very good. You can find it on Drive-Thru RPG.
Awesome. I have to pick that up.
And that was sort of my only professional credit for a while. I submitted to Onyx Path, and then I happened to run into a couple of people from Onyx Path at Gen Con one year, and by that time I was dating Ian Watson, who is the community content manager for Onyx Path. This is worth noting socially, not because he got me the job or anything.
Yeah.
Did not. I love him very dearly. We've been dating for 5 years.
But you got in on your own credentials.
Well, what happened is I got invited to the meetup
Uh-huh.
because I knew some of the people from Onyx Path, and I met Danielle Harper, Danielle Lausen Harper, who is amazing, and she mentioned that she was looking for more writers for the Ghouls book for Vampire the Requiem 2nd edition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just ghouls, it's also Dhampirs and revenants, and it's great.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've struggled with codependence and mental illness and trauma, and I can write for this. And she's like, great, but can you string 5 words together? I'm like, I will string 7 words together, and I will even put punctuation.
Oh,
so she asked me to submit, and I got put on the book, and I was like, great, this is one of my dream projects. I've always wanted to write ghouls. This is very exciting. It's a shame that Changeling the Lost has already been put through edits. Well, there was a bit of a snafu with Changeling the Lost, which I actually can't get into right now, but basically parts of it had to be redone. And Rose Bailey, who at that time was working for Onyx Path, really liked my work on ghouls, so I got pulled onto Changeling the Lost. So any of the kith rules that you see in Changeling the Lost 2nd edition, I wrote all of the 12 kiths that are in the core book.
Oh, nice.
And I wrote the safety rules in the storytelling section, as well as most of the storytelling section, which I split with Steffi Devan.
Yeah.
And then from there, it just kind of blossomed.
Yeah, we just got done. One of my home games just got done with a campaign in 2nd edition. We love especially the flexibility of the kits and not being kind of tied to specific.
Tied to the theming.
Yeah, that was really cool.
One of my favorite parts of the new Changeling.
And what a wonderful game. So it sounds like a lot of stuff what you write is kind of has a very kind of dark atmosphere to it.
Yes. A lot of it, not all of it.
Yeah.
But a lot.
Is there is that kind of like a genre that you're drawn to, or how did it all come about?
I'm just booting up the Twitch. Oh god, my keyboard's breaking again. Terrible.
It's okay. I just pulled up the chat from Twitch just to make sure that that we don't have any messages that we've been missing.
Yeah. I've had it right
I'm literally
there.
doing the same thing right now.
Yeah. And if anyone has questions, feel free to just pop in, and I'm sure Jacqueline will let you know if she can answer it or not.
Yeah.
So how is writing? I know I'm taking over your question.
Oh, it's totally cool.
No, it's all good.
But how is writing a LARP different from writing a tabletop RPG?
Yeah. So let's go from the first question to the second question.
Yes.
So there have been a bunch of interesting articles out recently about how people who are dealing with grief and trauma find themselves attached to horror, right? Like just very attracted to horror. And I find that's very true with me. Is sometimes I just, like, a lot of times I'll be like, oh, I'm going to play Stardew Valley and I'm going to chill out and not deal with stuff. But sometimes I really just want to be comforted by the idea that there is horrible stuff in the world and that I'm not the only one dealing with it. And I want to deal with my pain through the catharsis of other characters. I want to be able to see myself reflected on the screen and know that usually there's a way out of things. Like, honestly, probably for that reason, Hellraiser is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
Because it is about a woman dealing with family trauma. And that's where the majority of my trauma comes from. And like, I have no small amount of partner trauma either, but that also comes through in Hellraiser because Hellraiser is it's weird because it's people think of it as like this gory, spooky horror movie. And it's really just this very sexual, intimate film about a woman being trapped in her own house. And, her nose not being respected.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a very dark film.
It's so good.
Yeah, especially if you kind of just look beyond the, I mean, the amazing puppetry and the
Yeah.
gore and effects and stuff like that. There's a story underlining it that is kind of more horrific than what is apparent.
Yeah. So that's sort of one of the things that draws me to horror, is being able to explore these spaces that aren't necessarily, things people want to talk about, and being able to do so in a safe and kind way, in a way where everybody's having fun.
Yeah.
With regards to the difference between writing a LARP and a tabletop, especially in horror, it all comes back to what my husband refers to as the primary gameplay loop, which is, what is the thing you are doing in this game? How do you achieve that? Dungeons and Dragons is a small tactics simulator. You're a bunch of mercenaries. You're going from place to place. You are killing monsters. You are getting treasure. You are getting better items. You repeat.
Yeah.
D&D can be made to do other things, but that's not its primary gameplay loop. Whereas with something like, I don't know, Monster Hearts, your primary gameplay loop is, let's put each other in awkward romantic and sexual situations that have giant consequences for everybody involved. Because everybody has a sex move, everybody has a move that, causes people to be closer or farther away from them. Everybody has a darkest self. Everybody's going to explode at some point. So
yeah, it's just kind of going around that drama in school loop. And Avery, was it Adler? Alder is amazing. I love that game so much.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, there's not much difference between tabletop and LARP. Now, granted, LARP does have more spatial constraints than tabletop, for example. Like, if I were to design a LARP, I would not use dice in a LARP, because a lot of, for example, femme-coded costumes do not have pockets.
Yeah.
You're not always going to have a surface to roll things on. So, like, with things I've designed with my husband and things I've designed by myself, we've used things like stopwatches, which you can put on a loop around your wrist, or we've used rock, paper, scissors, which I'm sure, since you were in the mess, you're familiar with it. But it's really useful in other contexts too.
Yeah.
Or we'll do, I don't know if you're familiar with the game Ninja, where you strike a pose and you're trying.
I love that game.
Yeah, I've used Ninja as a combat mechanic.
Oh, that is so cool. I miss that game so much.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the stopwatch. What's the mechanic resolution?
You can essentially do a D10 if you just click the stopwatch twice and you go to the 100th place.
Okay.
It's all the way to the right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I like that. That is really cool. Especially like I'm imagining kind of steampunk or something like that. You could definitely have
it was for my husband's superhero LARP, but yeah.
Ooh, nice. That sounds really cool. So, kind of going back to the horror and stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of the stuff you've been writing recently after the war, Cult has definitely, and Vampire, has been kind of some of the most, I guess, horror games that are come out like in the last couple of years. I know Cult had that history back in the 90s where it couldn't really be brought over to America, and of course, there is some. The uncensored version of Cult can't be like put into normal stores and stuff like that here in America, which goes. I mean,
it's also the version that came over to the U.S. in the 90s is also very out of print.
Yeah.
So.
So how do you go about writing horror in a way that that makes everyone feel like it's respected?
So I usually put the difference between good horror and bad horror as good horror is what scares me. Bad horror is what someone goes, oh yeah, this is gonna fuck them right up. So if I'm not putting myself in a vulnerable space where I'm like, oh yeah, this would scare me, if I'm not able to empathize with being scared and I'm instead just attacking my players with scares, then that's not interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I think something came up when the consent in role-playing games book was put on Drive-Thru RPG. There were a lot of people bitching about it.
Yeah.
And one of the guys in the cult group I'm part of on Facebook tried to like make his own alternate version of it that was like less SJW or whatever. Because he's like, yeah, this version allows you to have stuff like mounds of dead babies and haunted castles. And I'm like, dude, no one was trying to take away your mounds of dead babies or haunted castles.
Yeah.
You know why that is.
Yeah. You want the players to feel like their boundaries are going to be respected.
So close. The reason so when men hear horror, I'm generalizing here.
No, please go ahead.
But when privileged people hear horror, what they think of is like Dracula's castle and a bunch of gore and maybe like Hostel, where there's a big secret society that's just torturing people and whatever. That's respecting people's boundaries is important, but that's not the sort of shit that you usually need to ask consent for, because it's very unlikely that any of your players have actually dealt with real world trauma that involves haunted castles or mounds of dead babies or whatever, unless they're fucking Michelle Smith from Michelle Remembers, and even then she was basically hypnotized into believing that by her own psychiatrist, but I digress. Sorry, I've been doing a read-through of Michelle Remembers on my Twitter.
Yeah, nice.
It's the book that jump-started the Satanic Panic, and it's fucking terrible. It's really bad.
Oh, jeez.
I was told it was like a V.C. Andrews novel, but worse, and I was like, oh, I love V.C. Andrews. And I started the but worse went out of my other ear, and I'm like, oh,
it's worse. Yeah.
Like I think the worst thing she does is shit on a crucifix or something. Jeez. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's treated like this big fucking deal, and it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway, it would be if you were big into that religion.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because Michelle's like, oh yeah, I wasn't raised religious, but I knew it was wrong. Like, okay. Yeah. Okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, backtracking a little bit. Sort of there's almost a reverence to doing horror well. So if you are going to do sexual horror, you need to make sure everybody's okay with it, as Spence pointed out, which is you cannot violate anybody's boundaries at the table. And if people are not there for sexual horror, you're not going to be doing that. That's just how it is. But if you look again at movies like Hellraiser or Alien, they do sexual horror really well because the focus isn't, and then this person got raped. Isn't that scary?
Yeah.
This buildup, it is this almost loving reverence paid attention to the characters who are experiencing this danger, and the consequences feel extremely real. And I think that is what sort of really helps play horror like that safely. It is realizing that this is a very real and traumatic thing. And in order to handle it, you have to treat it with the gravitas it deserves.
Yeah, I think and I think we're both on that same cult Facebook group, and of course I'm on others where when that document went about, there was a lot of individuals kind of
you're taking away my shit. Like, no, I'm not taking away your shit.
And I think horror speaks to things that you fear, and I think a lot of privileged individuals have a difficult time grasping what true fear is, because on a day-to-day, for instance, myself, I don't have to worry about or I don't worry about something happening to me when I'm walking out by myself. But I know that there are individuals who obviously have that fear. And so I think the part of the discussion for like 2020 and beyond is definitely making sure that the privileged individuals understand that fear, and then making sure that they respect everyone else's fears along with that.
And it's just very interesting with regards to that is there's a couple of games that are running in my area that are being run by people of color that explore fears of slavery and fears of racism and things like that. And white people lose their goddamn mind when they're confronted with this. You're like, you can't make a game about racism. That's taboo. You can't do that. Like, no, it's people who have experienced it are the ones telling that story, and you have to make space for that. You, like, obviously you don't have to play in the game.
Yeah.
But
you should definitely let other people explore that avenue if they want.
Yeah. And I think that's what the point really is, right? And I think that's the point that a lot of these guys who flipped out about the consent in gaming document were missing, was that you don't have to be present, right? Like, you don't want to use these consent rules in your game, fine, don't. I'm not the consent police.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's something I actually wrote in one of my games. No, it's something I wrote on a forum because someone was like, oh, do we have to use these rules? Do we have to use these safety rules? I'm like, I'm not going to come to your house and beat you up. Like,
yeah,
you don't have to, but you can if you want to.
Yeah. And I was actually having this discussion with a friend of mine earlier today. You know, part of being a privileged person is that you make the issue about yourself instead of about the person that has experienced the trauma. And so if we go into these very sensitive topics with open eyes, we can educate ourselves on what that experience has been like, so that we can have more sympathy and compassion for people whose experience is not like ours.
Yep.
So I think the consent form is super important, but it also allows us to create more conversations about traumatic instances, so that it becomes less
taboo.
There's less stigma around it.
Yep.
And that's really important for anybody to have a really meaningful game. You know, I have done exactly one LARP, and it was so moving. I bawled for the last half an hour of the game, because it was just that intense of emotion. I was the character and felt all of the deep emotions that you got in 4 hours of play.
Yep. So, that's what we call emotional bleed. It's very normal. But I think it's really interesting that you point that out, because there's a lot of conversations in the tabletop and LARP space about whether games actually build empathy or whether they don't. And like, I think as with a lot of things, the answer is more complicated than that. Because if you just go into a game about racism, or like, I've played games about honor killings and trafficking, and they were really good, and they inspired me to do more research, but not everybody's going to do that same sort of research. Not everybody has the ADHD hyper-focus brain that I do. So, like, not everybody's going to walk away from a game with empathy having been built in their brains, and that's something we need to keep in mind. But it's also important that we do have that space that could possibly build that empathy. It's funny because the way, just circling back to the way people reacted, it was almost its own sort of horror in a way, right? Because it was this fear of having something taken away from them. And it was always framed in that way. It's, you're taking my game away from me. You're fucking up my game. You're doing this to me personally, when it was very much an opt-in sort of thing.
Right.
And I thought that was fascinating, because this idea that this optional set of suggestions even exists in this space was enough to freak these people out. And I think that's a really, actually particularly interesting form of horror.
Yeah. Yeah, it's curious to see people react in that way. Just the slightest hint that there is a change either promoted or could come about and either perceived as real or as not. But it definitely freaks people out to have that, which would be very interesting to see how it could be kind of that sort of fear used up in a tabletop setting. Be interesting to see.
So when you're playing like a horror game, like you're not writing it, but you're playing it, what is something that makes you go, oh God, that's terrible, but really interesting?
So honestly, probably the best example of that emotion for me is Bluebeard's Bride.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yep.
I've only played Bluebeard's Bride once. I've run it a couple of times. I haven't been able to find anybody to run it for me who isn't Sarah Richardson.
Mhm.
But I'll get there, or I'll have her run it for me again, and it'll be fine. But like my favorite part of Bluebeard's Bride is how it forces you to write down your character's insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
And then the GM has this list of your character's insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
They are then expected to play on.
Whew. Yeah,
And
that's
it was so much fun playing that, and I was very, very lucky that I got to run Bluebeard's Bride on stream for Jacob Burgess,
Mhm.
Nice.
who is one of my co-writers and also a voice actor, and he is really wonderful. But when we ran that one, I was running it for him, and I am an awful GM because it was almost 2 years ago now, and I don't even remember the names of the other people, and that makes
Oh
me
man,
an asshole.
I can't remember anything for like last year, so.
Well, you have a toddler. That's your excuse.
But I ran it for a bunch of really lovely, actually, video game industry people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And one of them mentioned that the thing they left behind was their friend, who was this goat herd.
Mm-hmm.
Who, you know, he was the bride's friend, and he was this little boy, and he was just so sweet, and he would sometimes bring her flowers, and it was very cute. And so as they're going through the house and everything is terrible, they get to a cellar with a stuffed bear, like a giant fucking stuffed grizzly bear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Grizzly bear sitting in like a pool of stagnant water because the basement had been leaking. And I described its eyes as being human and like looking human and sad. And Jacob literally goes, fuck, he's in the bear. He's in the bear. He's in the fucking bear. He's like, just loses it. And I'm like, yeah, good shit. Because paying attention to your characters and pulling from the things they give you is, I think, one of the most rewarding fucking aspects of GMing. When I played with Sarah Richardson, I forget. I think I said something about how the bride's hair was like her pride and joy because it was the femme fatale. So I don't remember if it was hair or mouth. But one of us had said that the hair was the pride and joy. So when we went into a room, there was actually a tiara that latched on to your head with teeth, and then nice. Like colored your hair, like your hair got matted with blood and stuff. And it was just like a really nice way of pulling that in. And like I ran it at Gen Con a couple of times, and one of my people was like, oh yeah, the bride is really tall and willowy and, you know, very elegant. So every time she entered a room, I was like, yeah, everything, you know, seems structured for a smaller, daintier woman than you.
Ooh, man, that is, ooh. It's a game I've always wanted to be a part of. I've yet to, it looks so amazing.
Yeah, it's very good. It can be tricky because you all have to be in that mindset where you all are going to hurt each other as characters and GM, but not as players.
Yeah.
Right? It's a sort of, it's something that was interesting is a friend of mine and I were talking about how gaming and kink are very similar. Because if you were doing any of what you were doing in most kink scenes without consent, it would be abuse.
Yeah.
It would be a felony.
It's the same thing with a lot of horror games. Is consent is paramount, otherwise it's abuse.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and especially for like taking into a context of like a regular D&D game, and sometimes when like PvP happens and stuff like that, and if someone hasn't signed up for some of the stuff that's kind of going on, you definitely have to make sure that everyone's okay, or even if it's a character to character, that could still be abuse if they're not okay with it. Which is so important. Why I feel like in any game you should make sure to check in whenever you kind of get into these out of the context of what the game is normally around. Definitely.
Right. So you have a ton of games on Drive-Thru RPG.
So
They
many.
do.
Do you have any favorites that stick out to you that that you can tell us about?
Oh boy. I also have a bunch on itch.io.
Yeah.
I know I'm asking you to pick one of your favorite children.
Yeah. Hold on one second.
It's okay. I mean, I have
Let me
a
just
favorite
pull up
kid.
my catalog here.
Well, Mitch, what's your favorite?
Work.
Oh man. I mean, my favorite TTRPG in general, or my favorite
well,
kid.
Well, you have one, so
Yeah, so it's kind of
that.
easy.
I was saying TTRPG that Jacqueline has worked on.
Oh, I mean, it's obviously Cult, because Cult has a special place in my heart as one of the best like horror games I've experienced for a very long time, and it's definitely one of my favorite games. Period. Between the writing, the art, the graphic design, it's just this perfect masterpiece of what I feel horror should be, and especially Lucina and the other scenarios in the Taroticum. The Taroticum. It's just amazing seeing like all these different writers come together and create all these different works and come to horror in very different ways. And Lucina definitely kind of resounds in my mind just because of the family aspects of the whole scenario.
Yep.
After the War is something that I'm really interested in reading. It is on my list of things to read because it looks amazing. So I'm definitely, that might kind of come up. Definitely won't beat out Cult, I'm pretty sure. It's just because Cult. But After the War, I think will definitely be up there in terms of horror.
So, do you have your catalog now?
Yes. Oh wow. I think. God. Okay. So can I do a favorite tabletop and a favorite LARP?
Sure.
Yes.
All right. So my favorite tabletop, I think, that I've put out is called Debt is Only the Beginning. And yes, that is a cult reference.
Ooh, yeah.
I was looking at this one, actually.
It is always going to be pay what you want. I will never actually jack it up any further than that. But it is a game about being a wizard who has to pay the bills. Yes, it is
I already like this game.
That's too horror.
And other wizards can maybe afford ivory towers or penthouses or whatever, but you're a wizard who has to work a fucking day job in order to do magic. You have 3 stats. I believe it's money, matter, and magic. And you start with a certain amount, and you actually have to spend your stats to do things.
Nice.
So you have to spend 2 money every month to, pay your rent.
Right.
And then in order to buy things or get jobs or things, you have to roll under your money stat. It's a roll under system.
I love mundane RPGs because
Yep.
they can become something so bizarre.
Yep.
So I'm getting that one. Okay.
Yeah, grab that. That's amazing.
I'm making my shopping list. Can you tell?
And I think the LARP that I am most proud of right now is Skeleton Song, which I wrote early last year. And it was laid out by my friend Mary Georgescu, who I also mentored for IGDN.
Oh, cool.
I like
love
the
IGDN.
art on it.
Isn't it beautiful?
It's so good.
She does this gorgeous pixel art. It is actually the same as the same artist who did my banner for Twitter.
Okay, cool.
And also my my itch. But she is a fantastic pixel artist. I love her work. But the idea behind Skeleton Song is I am a huge true crime fan. I love listening to true crime podcasts. I love watching Criminal Minds, which is not, it's obviously not true crime, but they usually do the whole thing where they're like, let's base this on a case that came out last week or whatever. And something I noticed throughout all the true crime reporting, even the really good true crime reporting in a lot of ways, victims of serial killers are always mentioned as belonging to the serial killer, right? They're his victims.
Yeah.
They are this number of the victim. They were killed in this way. For this reason, they're his victims. So I wrote this LARP actually after watching the Ted Bundy tapes, the nonfiction one, not disturbingly evil, shockingly wicked and vile, or whatever the hell that god-awful movie with Zac Efron was.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I kind of want to write something about the emotions of people who survived Ted Bundy when he goes to the electric chair, but also I'm very strongly against writing state executions in games. Just for me personally, like I'm sure people can do it better than I can, but I am not the person who can write that.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, well, what if I instead wrote a game about the ghosts of a serial killer's victims, and they are in purgatory until he dies, because in a metaphysical way, because everybody says they're his, they're tied to him. So the idea is you have to regain your memories while you're in purgatory. And, you know, when everybody regains their memories, a couple minutes afterwards, he dies. So he shows up to come collect them, and they sort of have to band together. And it's called Skeleton Song because they have to sort of hum or chant or whatever they want to do to chase him away.
Yeah.
So that, he can go wherever he's going and they can be free of him.
Have you, I assume, but how was it kind of watching the LARP, like, in reality?
It's a lot. It's heavy. Yeah, I will be running it again at Intercon this year, so I'm looking forward to that, but it's a heavy game.
Yeah, I bet.
It's a really heavy game.
Yeah. So your Skeleton Song just reminded me of a book that I worked on, and I think it's called it's either Breath of Witchy Air or Murder Most Witchy. One of them, there's a serial killer, and all of the ghosts of that serial killer follow around the main characters trying to solve the murder, because they don't actually know who their killer is. So I was just like, that's really cool. I wonder if it was inspired by this game. Because you said you were inspired by true crime and such.
Yeah. No, I was inspired actually.
The Bundy things. Yeah.
It's actually kind of funny because the other thing I was inspired by is, of all things, in the fucking Book of Vile Darkness for D&D, there's something called Dark Chant, which is where a bunch of undead get together and sing, and it has the effect of turning clerics the way clerics turn undead.
Oh, interesting.
I'm like,
yeah.
That's rad as hell. I want to do something with that. And then it just sort of ran full speed at my Ted Bundy inspiration. I'm like, oh, okay.
But does that work on clerics that are evilly aligned?
I mean, I assume not. It might. Like, because you know how you can target turning?
Yeah.
I assume it works on whoever they're targeting.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, a lot of the stuff, as kind of said before, has like a pay what you want or a low cost. What is the decision behind that? Because I know like a lot of different artists go about this in a completely different ways. So I'm curious.
Imposter syndrome.
Mm.
It's like I want to price this so the most number of people can buy it. I know for a fact that I believe it's itch that the threshold to make a actually make a worthwhile amount of profit is $3.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my stuff is priced at $3.99, which is sort of the same on drive-through.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, interesting.
Nice. Now you have a Patreon as well.
I do, yes.
So if people back you on Patreon, what are the like things that you give as rewards for backers?
I am so glad you asked that.
Yeah.
I am too, because I'm really curious. And I can't see it.
So my Patreon used to be a lot more complicated than it is now. But what I am doing right now is you get all of my games that I write, not games that I freelanced for, because those are work for hire and I can't legally give you my text from those. You get games I designed, you get short stories that I write that I don't really publish anywhere else. You get reader polls for things. If you back at $5 or more, you get your name in the credits. And I'm also starting a new thing this month because something that I struggle with my ADHD is when I'm reading something on a screen or on a page, my brain goes faster than my mouth. And hello.
Yeah, that's my kid clawing at the door. Don't mind.
Don't mind the baby behind the curtain.
Ah! See, that would have been great when we were talking about cult. We could have
I know,
had the
right? That's what when I had.
No, it's one of the singing ghosts.
Yeah. When I had was it Peter Nalo on? He talked about listening to some of our cult actual plays, and you can hear sometimes my kid in the background like screaming, just nice ambient noise.
Nice. Oh, Petter, I love him. I'll throw him out a window. That's just my relationship with Petter. As Petter, I love you. I'll throw you out a window.
Yeah,
it's a good relationship.
Well, he and I get into arguments sometimes about things. He's very Scandinavian.
Ooh,
he's extremely Scandinavian.
I'd be interested to hear these arguments.
Mostly they're about the technicalities of safety rules. Because it's come and gone, and we've mostly reached a consensus. But I still threaten to throw him out windows. But I respect him, and he respects me, and it's all good.
Yeah. Is it sorry, kind of like going off track, but it is something I've always been curious about. The kind of difference in players and GM's perspective of what games are and should be, compared to here in America versus like Europe and other nations.
So here's the problem. There's not actually an American analog games culture, just like there's not actually a Scandinavian games culture. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, the Americans versus the Scandinavians. And like, that means nothing. It is a false dichotomy that actually cuts out huge sections of players in Europe and the Middle East and Africa and Latin America. So like, Petter is of a different mindset than I am, and I tend to tease him about it being that he's Scandinavian.
Yeah.
Because he likes to say that it's because he's Scandinavian. So.
That's fair.
Yeah, like. No, one of the things I like saying to him that makes him mad is with a heavy heart that I must inform you, Scandinavians are at it again.
Scandinavians.
Yep.
Yeah, Scandinavian, Norwegian.
Oh.
Yeah, Scandinavians. They're just at it. What are they at? I don't know. Scandinavian things.
I just like that word.
Yeah, it's great. But no, I love Petter. He is a dear friend. And he also gave me development work on Cult. I will be developing a book about kids in the world of Cult.
Oof.
So I'm very excited for that.
Do you want to come be on our game on Wednesday? It's called Children of the Fall. And it sounds like it'd be right up your alley.
It sure would, but also I'm very busy.
Yes.
I appreciate the invite though. But no, I'm very excited because I loved Innocence for World of Darkness. And unfortunately, it was written by Matthew McFarland, who used to be a dear friend of mine. And then a bunch of people were like, hey, you know, he's like a weird abuser and rapist, right? And I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Because he and I used to be very close. And I found out he was apparently spreading shit about me, which I'm not very happy about because I thought we were bros. And like, he harmed a bunch of my friends. So
yeah. It's always very
so it was not great, but Innocence is a great book. It is actually a very solid and good book on child psychology in the world of darkness. So that is something I would like to use. Like, I'd sort of like to write a spiritual successor to that for Cult.
That'd be cool. When is there any estimated time?
I'm still outlining it. My outline.
We do not know these deadlines of which you speak. No deadlines.
No, literally, like I started asking people if they wanted to write on it in November, and I'm still writing the outline because the outline's not due until like mid-February.
Yeah.
And they're like, when are you still putting me on this book? And I'm like, boo, I don't even have the outline done.
It's a lot to get done.
Development outlines are terrifying and intimidating.
Yeah,
I could imagine.
Well, you have to write, hey, this is what I want you to write for this section. And Petter's like, oh yeah, I don't really have a word count for you. I'm like, how am I supposed to divide things into sections? And how do you want a fucking window? Okay. If you're watching, Petter, I love you. You know that I love you.
I'm gonna send this video right to Petter.
Yeah, do it. No, he's a doll.
Yeah, he was amazing when he came on.
He knows that defenestration is how I show affection. So, fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
It's perfect. All right, so yeah, definitely last call for questions. We got about 7 minutes left on the interview. So is there anything you want to talk about, Jacqueline? I know you have like this huge scope, award-winning writer.
Pay your goddamn writers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's very important.
Like, there are people I will write for friend rates, but the Science Fiction World Association rate is, I think, 6 or 8 cents a word. Pay your writers.
Yeah.
If you cannot pay your writers enough money, please let them know that you are underpaying them.
Yeah, I think transparency is very important in the industry. I mean, it's obvious that the tabletop, like the industry in general, is growing. I think part of Critical Role has done a great job of kind of like getting all these people who weren't into the games but popping into it. And then there's, of course, a lot of different organizations that have started doing the same thing.
I want to like Critical Role very, very badly.
What's up?
But also, I was in a roundtable group where someone just decided that they were going to answer a question that the moderator posed by reciting the plots of their favorite episodes of the Adventure Zone and Critical Role for a solid 15 minutes.
Oh dear. Yeah, that's not good.
Oh God, Petter's watching. Hi, Petter. He's watching because he's like, "Oh, you're great as well." And I'm like, "Ah."
Hey, man. Oh, that's
awesome. I'm not sorry I threatened to throw you out a window.
Several times. I feel like we're gonna have a clip of just every time you've said that on the stream.
Just do a master reel of it.
Yeah. Anybody who's good at making GIFs, make that happen.
Oh man.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're supposed to give me more adventures to edit for Cult, Petter. I need those. Please give them to me.
More Cult stuff, which is something we're super excited about. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
The new stuff will be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He says soon. with 2 exclamation marks.
So
So,
what
you know,
was kind of our last question, because I definitely feel we'll end on like the cult thing, because
cult thing, let's do it.
um was there any kind of what were the differences in how you approach cult from other TTRPGs in terms of the horror genre, or was it just the same?
Let's see. So cult is what I refer to as apotheosis horror,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of my favorite types of horror, because I fucking love horror that is sort of the journey to becoming a god, and I had no idea that that was a genre until I really got into it.
Mm-hmm.
There are some fucking amazing Reddit no sleep stories about this. If you or your viewers are curious, the Infected Town trilogy is really good, as is the Left Right game.
Yeah, Infected Town. That's the one with the
The black mold.
Okay, yeah. I've seen it on Facebook,
It's
and it's been
so
so
good.
good. Yeah.
And it's just a weird cosmic dualism
Mm-hmm.
thing. And it starts off as I have black mold in my apartment that's giving me nightmares, and turns into this whole battle of gods over a universe, and it's fucking amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Left Right game is a bunch of people play a game where at every intersection you turn left and then right and then left and then right, and it actually takes them into this alternate world that is very cult-like.
Huh.
Like at one point, two, this is a minor spoiler, 2 of the major characters get taken away on those tow trucks that have the crosses on them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've
But
always
they
thought
actually,
those were super fascinating.
I know, and they're used to great effect in this story because they're actually taken away on the crosses with the
Oh,
tow hook in their mouths,
jeez.
and like it's very cult.
Yeah.
I think with cult, the primary loop for me
Mm-hmm.
in cult is you are doing things to cause yourself to be closer to being a god.
Mm-hmm.
Like at some point, that's what cult is going to turn into, or not. Some people just like running cult as like investigative horror, and that's totally fine and valid.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, cult starts very small scale and then expands and expands and expands. And a lot of people either miss the small scale entirely or just throw out all of the cosmic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like not all of the cosmic stuff, but like, oh, you're going to be fighting a lictor in this game, and like that's not going to have any far-reaching consequences or whatever. So I think for me, cult is about starting small and building out,
Mm-hmm.
which is why my first scenario for cult, La Cena,
Mm-hmm.
was about an immigrant family in the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, you know, oh, you're not taking down an archon or anything, but it's literally this kid of this family died, and his dreams have formed into a shape of himself that is now going to try and eat the dreams of the rest of the family.
Yeah, and like I think that's one of the best things about cult, and I think what lends itself to cults being such great campaigns is that kind of slow build from the small into the holy hell, we're actually divinity, like
Holy hell, literally.
yeah, like holy hell.
Yeah, that's why I think Black Madonna is such a great campaign, is because it starts with you meeting a friend of yours at a dinner party.
Yeah.
And ends with you going into the shores of a different reality after having dealt with the resurgence of a particular death angel in a time-traveling nonsense caper.
Mm-hmm. So good. Oh man, I think we're about like on our 8th episode for our Black Madonna actual play.
That's exciting.
And
where are you in the Black Madonna right now?
We are on we are coming, like, I think we're at the beginning of Act 2.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in for some fun shit. You're gonna beat up so many Nazis.
So many.
Yay!
So many. There's so many fucking Nazis in the Black Madonna.
Always punch the Nazis.
That is one of the nice things about cult, is I have never actually seen a cult in like some horror games like to be edgy, like, oh, you're playing Nazis or whatever. I've never seen a cult scenario with Nazis in it where you're not punching the Nazis.
Yep. It's the Nazis.
Back me up on that, Petter, if you're still here.
He's always watching.
He's always watching.
Oh, and so one last question. I know we're about on time, but your cult scenario,
and the rocket's red glare.
There you go. Can you tell us about that?
Petter says that's true. There is no cult scenario with Nazis where you are not punching the Nazis. Yeah. He also said it with 2 exclamation points, so you know it's true.
Yeah. You gotta punch the Nazis.
It's very important.
Yeah, they gotta know. Like.
Anyway, so the Rockets Red Glare was actually written while I was working a minimum wage job the night of the election. And I literally came into work crying the day after the election. And I was in the middle of writing Lysena, and I'm like, Petter, please let me write an extra scenario for this. I need to do something to get my grief out. He's like, yeah, sure, okay. So it went through a lot of reworking, because what I originally wanted was to have Pence have a cabinet full of purgatides that he was torturing to give the campaign power.
Yeah.
But we decided it was actually much better if, spoiler, Trump was a lictor of Yesod, who is one of the archons who is currently in hiding. And Pence was a Razide of Imichikoth, I think. I don't know. It's been a while since I've written it.
There's so much lore and stuff.
Yeah.
It's been almost 4 years.
Petter says, yeah, but he didn't put 2 exclamation marks after it, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, what does that mean?
It may be false.
I don't know. What does it mean? I don't know. It's just Scandinavian dialect.
Yeah, I feel like if I
like, oh, okay, we got the 2 exclamation marks. So
cool. I feel like if I ever met Petter in real life and I have my copy of Cult, I'm just gonna ask him to put down 2 exclamation marks.
Just 2 exclamation marks. There you go.
Just at the end of Cult, so we know it's true.
There we go. I regret to inform you that the Scandinavians are at it again. Anyway. So essentially what is happening in And the Rocket's Red Glare is this idea that these 2 powers of the universe are making a pact. And that pact is being made through the election of the president and the vice president of the United States, who are currently the most, currently still the hegemonic country on the planet. So you are playing interns of the Trump campaign.
Sorry.
And you all have your reasons for being there.
Yep.
And some of them are worse than others.
Can one of them be because we're part of an elite strike team that's just waiting for the right moment to take them both down? Sorry. That went dark. I apologize to our listeners and
I mean, no, it wasn't that dark. It's just that it misses the point of the scenario.
I know.
It's okay. No, there's one very nice girl who's like, yeah, I was a Democrat and I want to learn how the other side does politics.
Oh.
How many characters are there for the scenario?
I believe, if I remember correctly, there are 12 possible characters. There's somewhere between like 7 and 12 possible characters you can pick from.
Nice.
You can basically make any constellation of them.
Yeah.
And they can show up as NPCs as well. I've seen a couple. Red Moon Roleplaying did a wonderful playthrough of it, which was phenomenal, and I loved it. And it was just really gross and terrifying. And I was like, oh, this is so good. And another friend of mine who is on our cult group, who has been keeping the cult journal of his various playthroughs.
Was it Cats or?
Yeah, it was. I think it was Cats.
Yeah.
Alex, not Alex Obernig, but.
Yeah, I think because he just posts the blogs or something about every.
Yeah, and the beautiful art. I believe the art is done by his wife.
Oh wow.
And it's really good. Anyway, but they did a playthrough of that, and that was super fun. And like, I think in his playthrough, like one of the interns who was a Trump diehard, like offered to sacrifice himself at the end. And I know in the Red Moon roleplay playthrough, I see a bus. Let me shove you under it. Yeah, like
Definitely a scenario we should have on the stream.
it's
sounds
fucking
amazing.
rough, dude.
Let's save it for after the election.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because then it will be more satisfying.
yeah.
It's a 4 hours. It can be played in about 4 hours.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is very linear. It's probably one of the most linear scenarios I've ever written.
Mhm.
But I was specifically asked to write something that was easy and people could follow, and I'm like, yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
We had there were like little modular scenes that can be fitted in different places, and it usually turns out differently
Mhm.
depending on who's playing and what characters they're playing. So
Awesome stuff. Well, all right, that's pretty much our time here.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing up, Jacqueline. And
for having me.
Yeah, for people watching, of course, the details of Jacqueline's Patreon, itch, as well as drive-through will be right underneath if you're watching on YouTube later on. We definitely
Want me to put it in the stream chat too?
That would be
Yes.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
And please, 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 please check out all of Jacqueline's work because it is amazing
Please
stuff.
do. Please buy my things.
I did. I bought that debt one because I was like, nope, I need this game.
Need it in my life.
I need it in my life because it gives me joy.
Yay.
Yeah, and of course, if you are interested in more interviews and one-shots, actual plays, and all the stuff that is Penny for a Tale stuff, please check us out at pennyforatale.com, and you can find pretty much everything concerning us, future scheduling stuff as well as past.
Oh, whoops! I put the itch link is wrong.
There we go.
Oops. There we go.
So right there, you can click it.
You can click it. Let me bring up my drive-through too while we're still here.
Yeah.
Spence, do you have any closing remarks?
Stay tuned because afterwards, like we're gonna take a little break, but afterwards, me and Mitch are gonna have a little fireside chat.
What are you fireside chatting about?
Gaming, life, the universe, everything.
I'm so fucking hard on my keyboard. Like I already have one key missing and like another one's loose. Like a fucking that wants to come out, and I'm like,
I went and got one of the quiet keyboards, but you can still hear it. It's just the very, very muted.
Mine
tapping.
is loud as hell. And
is it one of those ones where if you run your fingers over it, it just goes?
Yep. Yep, that's mine.
Yeah, those are super fun.
Yeah, I look at my keyboard and it's just like making noises. It's ridiculous. All right, Jacqueline.
No.
Any closing remarks?
Please buy Cult. It's great. Please keep an eye out for Fading Suns, which is awesome. It will be out hopefully either later this month or next month. And if you want to play a game that's kind of like Dune and has queer nobles in space, I got you.
Go for it.
Also, if you're into podcasts at all, I wrote season 5 of Immunities, which is a morally gray hive mind apocalypse podcast audio drama.
Nice.
It's very good. Season 5 should be coming out at the end of this month or anywhere from early to mid-February, and it focuses on a trauma survivor. And if you want to catch up on that, there are 4 seasons that you can binge, and you can find that wherever you find podcasts. And yeah, I'm around and doing stuff, and you'll probably run into me if you're in the tabletop or LARP space. So yeah, anywhere
and everywhere. Well, thank you again,
like
Jacqueline.
I'm like Petter, except you can't see out the window.
Never. Well, thank you very much, and everyone have a wonderful night. And check us out in a couple minutes when we talk.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.